Welcome back to the C Block, or final section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast news show. I'm Alaina Pinto. One more reminder, if you want to keep track of the nation's cannabis news, you should download the free app for PCM TV or just scan the QR code on the screen. The fate of cannabis consumption lounges, though, continues to evolve in different states, and California has them, and so does Nevada. But in many other legal states, like Massachusetts, these consumption clubs are limited to private membership clubs where consumption is allowed but sales are not. The Cannabis Control Commission in the Bay State is finally addressing the rules and regulations for these kind of licenses that were part of the original ballot question that paved the way for adult use of cannabis in 2016. The first private membership club for personal consumption to open in the Bay State is the Summit Lounge in Worcester, Massachusetts. Back in 2023, PCM TV founder Jimmy Young hosted 2 live podcasts with interviews and prizes from the Summit Lounge. And now Kyle Moon, the Summit Lounge's proprietor, has penned a letter to the Cannabis Commission sharing his experiences in order to help them make the rules and regulations that will govern this new development of legalization. Kyle's letter was submitted on the final day of public comments, and here are some of his insightful concerns about the expected new license type. According to the letter, Kyle suggests selective interpretation of regulations as well as selective enforcement by inspectors, registered agent badging processes, and fees, security requirements, overregulation pertaining to packaging, marketing, and operational requirements, testing requirements, especially where it intersects with on-site food infusion and consumption. These are some, but definitely not all, of the issues every Massachusetts cannabis licensee is struggling with. If you issue social consumption establishments without addressing these current issues, this license type will be unsustainable and unattainable for equity applicants. Signed, Kyle Moon, CEO, Summit Lounge. Now let's check in with the wild world of cannabis in the state of Oklahoma with Kimmie Cannabis.
I'm Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. On February 3rd, the legislative session begins again, with 22 new bills being proposed that will directly impact Oklahoma's cannabis industry. Stay informed by following okhouse.gov and oksenate.gov for updates. On a lighter note, 2025 events are in the works, and Oklahoma continues to host some of the best cannabis gatherings in the U.S. From weekend camping and river floats to educational conferences, music festivals, and more. That includes High in Heels, the bougie fundraiser event I created, breaking stereotypes while supporting local charities. I love experiencing cannabis culture in other states and encourage others to do the same. Right now, I'm in Honolulu, soaking in the aloha energy at the Hawaii Cannabis Expo, surrounded by amazing people who share a passion for this incredible plant. That's it for this week's Oklahoma Cannabis Update. I'm Kimmie Cannabis with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
In Michigan, one of the longest-running celebrations of all things cannabis is the Hash Bash in April. That's one of the oldest in the country, and it even has played host to the late John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who made an appearance in one of the first Hash Bashes in the early 70s. This year's date has been announced, and Amie Carter has more from Michigan.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters with this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Michigan's cannabis news has been a bit quiet up until a few days ago. In Pontiac, the FBI is diving into some serious public corruption claims involving current and former city officials. This grand jury investigation is raising eyebrows over the possibility of bribery and shady cash dealings tied to the city's marijuana industry launch. Emails obtained by the Detroit News reveal that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit has even issued a grand jury subpoena for a former city official's bank and personal records. Looks like Pontiac's plans to light up the cannabis scene might be getting a little too smoky. We'll keep you posted on any updates. Stay tuned. The CRA announced a consent order against Albion's base company prohibiting the grower from operating in the state and permanently banning its owners from participating in the industry. It's suspected that the operation attempted and failed to grow quality mold-free marijuana for the legal market, instead turning to the illicit market, including importing and exporting black market marijuana to and from Michigan. On another note, I know that I'm not the only one looking forward to Hash Bash. This will be year 53. On April 5th, thousands will gather in Ann Arbor to attend America's longest running annual cannabis legalization rally. This is your first reminder to put the date in your calendar. I will be talking a lot about it in the next upcoming weeks. That will do it for this week's Michigan Report. I am Amie Carter with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Great Britain has made some progress and changes to their cannabis laws, but with a new change in government control, what was a promising development has now backfired, further delaying any future reform. One more international market to keep an eye on is Australia. According to Prohibition Partners' new global cannabis report, Australia's medical cannabis revenues are expected to grow from around 600 million in US dollars to more than 1.2 billion by 2028. Now let's check in on the publicly traded stocks with High on Wall Street's Doug Miller.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. The Scott's Miracle Grow Company plans to spin off its marijuana unit, Hawthorne Gardening Company, into a standalone operation, a move company executives believe will make the entity more valuable. With Hawthorne's earnings, the EBITDA expected to be about $20 million this year. The Ohio-based company's leadership determined that the cannabis arms would fare better on its own. The company's board must approve the move, noting that assets could be moved within 2 months. So let's see how the stock chart looks. It's trading around $70 and it's setting up. So watch for dips and any pullbacks as it sets up. It could take a few weeks, and trade smart and lock in those profits. That's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
This is Debi Facey with the Cannabis Coast to Coast Canadian News Report. In 2017, Justin Trudeau decided that he was going to legalize cannabis if he became Prime Minister in Canada. The initial promising of that, though, was when he was elected, not the date that he announces. That was a year prior. With that happening, we had stores popping up throughout Ontario, I would say the following week, which was cool, but very, very, very unfortunate. This led to a fallout where the stores were raided and most of the operators as well as tenders faced criminal charges. But the real issue was that Trudeau decided not to take accountability and responsibility for that announcement and the legalization that was going to be coming in a year to come. The accountability was lost. The government should have overseen and ensured a fair responsibility of handling such significant policy changes, especially when it involved a scheduled drug. Our industry is now struggling. The cannabis industry began to formalize the rules and regulations and created them without the input from those that had been involved in the cannabis culture before. These are people that unfortunately had no prior experience in the industry and were suddenly in charge of many of what we now have, which are issues. When it came to the industry, many were driven by the profit rather than the passion or knowledge. And the result made that the genuine individuals that were involved for the right reasons, and the culture, the knowledge, and the legacy, we were pushed out. The big moneymakers were able to now create and sustain due to their big pockets. The lack of effective regulation left most of these cannabis stores not only vulnerable, but an easy way for most to face robberies. With the minimal security measures, these stores became targets. The situation arose from the efforts to hide the true nature of the culture from the public, and with the attempting of making it unnoticeable, made it more susceptible to crime. I understand that the number of cannabis stores licensed are struggling, and the businesses are especially trying to survive. But with the public not being able to see inside these stores, but the businesses being so vulnerable, it is being neglected when it comes to security. Trudeau's overall failure to stay engaged and address the issues when we not only asked for them, but called for them and begged for them, has led to this new office to want to fix the problems by minimizing the amount of licenses, the amount of stores, the amount of operators, as well as trying to make it fair. We all know that that is going to be something that is going to be hard to swallow, but we all know also at the same time that this is something that may be needed in order for us to recreate what we all were trying to create in the beginning, which was a sustainable, fair industry for not only the operators, bud tenders, but the consumers. And that is both the medical and the recreational. This is Debi Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast News Report.
Down in Virginia, a U.S. appeals court upheld a Virginia law regulating the sale of hemp products based on the total amount of THC in it. The court did not distinguish if the THC amount was derived from Delta 8 or 9, so no changes in that law in the Cavalier state. But with more from Virginia, here's Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I hope everyone had a great Groundhog Day, and I hope Punxsutawney Phil's reveal doesn't hinder your grow plans for this year. A few weeks ago, one of our viewers, Chuck, left a comment on our YouTube channel that brought up an interesting question. It was one that I'd already been investigating, but his comment got me back on the trail, and here's what I found out. Chuck asked us, I just wonder how much money Governor Youngkin has invested in intoxicating hemp companies. Great question, Chuck. Well, prior to running for governor, Youngkin was the co-CEO of the Carlyle Group from 2018 until 2020 and had 25 years in total with the company. The Carlyle Group is one of the largest private equity groups in the nation and one of the largest investment firms in the world. Glenn Youngkin himself has a net worth of over $440 million and a hefty portfolio. So I did some research on both his investments and what the Carlyle Group had publicly owned or invested in. And I found out that actually neither the Carlyle Group or Youngkin had ever shown to invest or associate in any cannabis-related companies. The fact is, most members, both present and past, of the Carlyle Group are highly conservative and truly don't like cannabis at all and take a prohibitionist attitude towards it. Youngkin, like many others, has been vocal that he feels that it's a gateway drug and has gone as far as to say that he's never met anyone that has used cannabis that was successful. He claims to have never used cannabis himself. Now that falls in line with most prohibitionists that demonize what they have no true experience with and are unwilling to understand or attempt to see from a different perspective. So, there you have it, Chuck. Let's face it, he just doesn't like cannabis. That's how he was raised by Southern conservatives that made well for themselves. And like other wealthy people, they always seem to think that they have the answers for the rest of us, regardless of the facts or evidence presented to them. But that's where we, the people, come in. It's up to us to contact our politicians that do care, and we'll hold the ones that don't accountable. Thanks for the awesome question, Chuck. Keep them coming. Well, that's going to do it from this week from the Virginia Cannabis Connection and reporting from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
And finally, tonight, many late night TV talk show hosts are pretty much pro cannabis. In Bill Maher's latest special on Cinemax, he shared this story about his personal use and the changes over the past few years. Bill said, "We've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas. Take something like pot. The fact that I can travel this country now without sweating bullets that I did for years, worrying that the drug sniffing dog at the airport was going to narc me out. For years, I took this much pot and put it in a Kleenex in a ball and hid it under my parts." He hid it under his parts. He didn't say that. He said, scrotum. But the fact that, and then he said this, the fact that I smoked my own ball sweat for like 30 years and now I don't have to, well, that's progress. And that's the end of his quote. I'm sure you can see the whole thing somewhere else. You can't make these stories up. That's disgusting, but you got to do what you got to do. That's this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast news. I'm Alaina Pinto. Of course, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so consume it responsibly, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Bee Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
It's Debi Facey with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.